at River Valley Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I am passionate about the next generation. I love what this next generation has to offer us, and I would argue that they're the now generation. And today I have the privilege of talking to you about Generation Z. If we could title this whole message today, this whole conversation that we're having, it would be Meet Gen Z. Many of us have read the books, we've read the studies, we've seen the statistics, and now we're asking ourselves, what does this mean for my ministry? How should I be preaching different, doing small groups different, structuring my services different? Well, today I kind of want to give the 101 on Gen Z. And what I want to do is I want to give you the research that I've discovered and that I found when it comes to shifting and transforming the structures of your ministry. Now, what I want to do is start out today with a few stats that I got from Barna Research in conjunction with One Hope Ministry. One big thing to remember is that 58% of US teens identify as Christians. That's not bad. That's over half. And at the same time, 75% of them read the Bible once a month or less. 16% of Christian teens haven't attended church in the last 6 months. And 35 million US young people raised in Christian households may walk away from a life with Jesus by 2050. That's a crazy, staggering statistic that we're seeing. And many times we look at how the next generation is leaving the church and we're saying we need to change in order to reach them better. And yes, that's true. You know, there is a great quote out there that states, Gen Z is not an angry, embittered generation shaking their fists at heaven. They just don't think that looking up is all that important anymore. Many of us think that Generation Z is antagonistic. Many of us think that Generation Z is angry at God and angry at religion, and that's not the case. It's that they simply don't care. They're not atheistic, they're apatheistic. It's not that they don't believe in God, it's that they don't care. I would argue this. Maybe Generation Z is looking up at heaven, and they're just not looking up in the same direction that we're looking up. Maybe the way they're accessing God is fundamentally different from the way that we access God. And maybe they're leaving our churches not because they don't want more of God, but because we're giving them God in the way that they're not wired to receive Him. Think about it. Think about drinking water. If I give you water in a glass, that water is good water, it's pure water. But what happens if I take that water in a glass and I pour it into a bottle? Does it change? Is the water any different? No. What's changed is the structure we've put it in. And I think too many times we structure our ministries based on old models, while this new generation is a brand new structure. And we have to find a way to pour in the gospel into a new structure. And that's what this talk is about today. I'm not talking about watering on the gospel. I'm talking about being individuals, being leaders of the next generation that refuse to water down the gospel, but we also refuse to make old models our idols. So today we're going to go on a journey. We're going to have this conversation about what it means to reach the next generation. Now, there's this amazing verse. It's found in 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32. And it reads this way. From the tribe of Issachar, there were 200 leaders of the tribe with their relatives. All these men understood the signs of the times and knew the best course for Israel to take. Now, many of you are like, that ain't a memory verse in my portfolio. That is not something I would tattoo on my neck. I agree. I wouldn't. But what that says is that for every generation, God has a tribe of Issachar. For Israel, God selected people from this tribe to understand the signs of the times and help Israel to know the best course, the best steps and action to take. I believe in every generation, God puts a tribe of Issachar to be able to understand the signs of the times and help the church know the best course to take. And I believe that tribe of Issachar are youth pastors. They're next gen pastors. They're kids pastors. And yes, even young adult pastors. These are individuals that are seeing the signs of the times, shifting ministry contexts so that the church can survive and continue to thrive as it moves forward in the next generation. I believe that today we have a time unprecedented, unlike any other. Not only with what's going on in the world around us today and how many people are locked in at home, but today is unprecedented because for the first time in human history, we have a chance to reach people across borders and boundaries. Let me illustrate. In 1972, a social anthropologist named Margaret Mead made this amazing quote. It's almost prophetic. She's not even a believer, but she's stating this thing based on social anthropology. She says this. She says that throughout history, most cultures have been disfigurative, where parents and grandparents help the young to understand the future. Let me frame that up. That means things had changed so little that a grandparent could help prepare their grandchild for the future, and it would be relevant. She goes on and she says this: a few times throughout history, it becomes co-figurative, where change happens so fast that society depends on the young to help understand the future. What that means is society starts to pick up, culture starts to quicken, and the older generations don't really know what to do next. So they look at how the next generation is translating things and they're like, oh, I know exactly how to develop it now. But then she makes this amazing statement. She said, I anticipate that a time is coming in history where technology changes so fast that culture, for the first time in human history, will be prefigurative, where children will have to figure out for themselves what their values will be. Think about that. That's happening today, where technology, this is in 1972, this is before we had an iPhone. In 1972, she made the amazing statement that technology is going to be the catalyst that causes things to change so fast that young people are going to have to figure out for themselves what their values will be because their parents and grandparents can't get ahead of the game fast enough. Enter youth pastors. We have an opportunity to change the game. Let me reframe that quote in a different kind of context that you might understand. If you listen in history class, you know that there are three major ages in history: the agricultural age, the industrial age, and the informational age. Now, here's the thing we have to understand. In the agricultural age, everything was centered around the farm, around agriculture. The schoolhouse was the same building as the church house. And the most educated person in society at that time was the parson. It was the pastor. They knew how to read and write. They understood things. They were well read. They had studied up. They were often the most educated person in the room. And you were not known by anything else but, hi, who are you? What's your last name? What farm did you grow up on? Who's your grandfather? Oh, I know who you are. I know where you come from. That's how you were known. You were known by who you are. Now think about how the assembly lines come into picture and everybody starts moving from the farms into the cities. This is called the industrial age, to where the smartest person in the room is no longer the pastor, but the boss, the supervisor. They're now the most smart and the most educated person in the room. And you're no longer known by, hi, who are you? But, hi, what do you do for a living? And think of that. We still ask each other that question: hi, what do you do? What's your role in the church? And we value people and make judgments about people based on what you do. Hear me when I say that those are industrial age values. Enter the iPhone. Now, we know that technology started to enter the picture way before the iPhone, but the iPhone took the technological informational age and it put it on steroids. It put it into a place to where it was going at warp speed when the informational age entered. In 2008, when we put that iPhone in our hands, the smartest person in the room wasn't the pastor, it wasn't the boss, it was the person that could pull out their phone and get on Google the quickest. And no longer are you known by, hi, who are you? Or, hi, what do you do for a living? But you are valued by, hi, what do you think? And today, our students that sit in our kids' ministries, youth ministries, and our colleges, those same kids, those same young people, Generation Z, they don't care about you based on what you do. They care about what you think. Look at social media. The greatest comment, the greatest post that gets everybody to like it and agree with it, that becomes truth. It's not even truth that wins the day, it's people's rallying around what they perceive to be truth. So what you think matters more than who you are and what you do to the next generation. This is key. It's crucial. And I'm going to make a bold statement. I believe that within the next 5 years, we're going to see youth culture shift in such a way where we might see young people leaving the church as we are today, not because, not because they don't believe in God, but because we're giving them God within an industrial age structure and they are living in an informational age world. So what does this mean for your youth ministry? That's what I want to talk about today. It's really a contrasting of values between industrial age values and informational age values. Industrial age values say this, that you are valued based on production, performance, and quantity. Let me say that again. Industrial age values are production, performance, and quantity. When you work the assembly line, you got a raise, you were valued, you're given promotions based on what you produced, how well you performed, and how much product you could turn out on that assembly line. Think about working at McDonald's. Think about working in a warehouse. How hard you worked and how well you performed and what you produced and how much of that you produced determines your raise. Those are informational age values or industrial age values. Now, informational age values, we have to understand, have shifted to access, engagement, and community. to where what's valuable is what's accessible. What's valuable is what I can creates engagement and what I can engage. And what's valuable is what creates community around it and has community around it. Let me contrast those two. Remember, industrial age values are production, performance, and quantity, and informational age values are access, engagement, and community. Truly, it's about engagement over quantity. Engagement over quantity. It's not about how many people are sitting in your seats that students value. It's about whether or not those people in your seats are engaging. Case in point, I could have 400 followers on Instagram. And for every single post that I put out there, I get 40 likes. I have 10% engagement with my content. 10%, that's it. That's not much. Now, I could have my friend who has 40 followers on Instagram and he gets 40 likes, he has 100% engagement. Who's the influencer now, me or him? He is, because he has more engagement. Now, think about this. I could have a youth group of 400 kids and 40 are taking notes. I got 10% engagement, but my friend down the street could have 40 teenagers sitting in the seats and all 40 are taking notes. He has 100% engagement. Who's the more influential youth pastor now? Who's the better youth pastor now? Not the one with 400 in the room with only 40 taking notes, but the one with 40 in the room with all 40 of them being discipled and taking notes. See, what I'm saying is it's not the size of ministries that are going to gather kids, but it's the engaging content that we deliver, not just stuff that we want to say, but stuff that they need to hear. Okay. Now, many times we preach things that we want to say and that we know, but we're answering questions that they're no longer asking. Could I argue that maybe we are equipping people to reach a world that no longer exists by the way we preach? We're equipping our students to reach a world that they're not living in. It's a world that we lived in. And so we need to look at our content and we need to say, what questions are they asking and how can I make this content engaging? The second piece to this is not only engagement over quantity, but it's access over production. It's not how well your production value is. It's great. No, don't get me wrong. I love smoke on stage. I love lights. I love hype music. I love great quality stuff on the screen. I love all that. I'm about that. But what we have to understand is that's not what's going to bring them back. Okay? It's access that's going to bring them back. Now, hear me when I say this. Now, when we create something big, if that thing is not engaging, kids aren't going to come back. But if they have access to something, if they have a door that's built for them, they're going to come back over and over and over again. Case in point, the movie Frozen. Think about this movie. You guys know the song, Let It Go, Let It Go. Now it's in your head. You're welcome. I remember knowing that song before I even saw the movie. Why? Because the movie Frozen gave me a ton of access to its product. I not only saw Frozen commercials before the movie came out or Frozen previews on TV, but I saw Frozen interviews on late night talk shows. I saw Frozen karaoke sing-alongs, Frozen costumes at Halloween, Frozen chicken nuggets in the frozen food aisle. What Frozen did is it gave me access to its product, even though I wasn't looking for it. It put itself in front of me instead of expecting me to come to it. And many times we need to do the same thing as youth ministries. We need to build more doors on our youth ministry rather than just one door. So ask yourself, how many access points do you have on your ministry? Do you have one door and it's called Wednesday night? And hey, if kids come in, then they're part. If they don't, well, whatever, they miss out. Or are you building doors for everybody? Social media is a door. Wednesday night is a door. Your Sunday weekend services are a door. The way you have small groups is a door, or faith clubs in schools. Don't worry about what kind of doors you have. Just build more doors. Give more people access because people might show up because there's a door that's built for them. Okay, now if we're contrasting the two values, industrial and informational, remember it's engagement over quantity, access over production, and community over performance. And let me say this, community trumps personal decision 7 days. See, what we do is we often create individual opportunities for people to make decisions for life change. This means that you're in a room full of people, but you're not in community. You're surrounded by tons of people, but you're making a by yourself individual decision to change your life. Then when you do that as a teenager and you go to school the next day and sit at a lunch table surrounded by friends who don't love Jesus and who haven't made that decision and who are about to make a decision that's contrary to the one that you just made on Wednesday night, you're going to choose your community over your personal decision because community drives us as people more than personal decision does. That's why it is vital that we have people make a personal decision to follow Jesus Christ within the context of community, not just surrounded by people, but with people that have them in community. When I'm locked into a community, I pay the price to stay a part of community. And maybe more of our students are leaving, not because they don't love Jesus or love even what we're saying, but maybe they're leaving because they're alone, surrounded by people. So let's find ways to put access, engagement, and community. Am I creating accessible points on my product, on my youth ministry? Am I making that content engaging when they come through that door? And when they come through that door, are they finding true community? I went through my whole ministry and I said, look, if there's not access, engagement, and community on everything I do, I don't do it. Anytime I want to do something new, if I can't create authentic access, engagement, and community on everything that I do, I don't do it. Which leads me to this point. The reason this next generation is so different and they value those things is because of this. And if you take anything away from this talk, it's this, that the next generation is no longer a generation of consumers, but publishers. That means the end isn't consuming, the end is publishing. Back in the day, in the industrial age, stuff was built for the consumer. Everything was built for the consumer. They created products and clothing and music and art and movies that was built for the consumer, and I would receive it, consume it, and that would be the end. But this generation, due to access on an iPhone, an informational age generation, what they're doing is they're doing more than consuming. Actually, they begin with consuming something and then they publish it immediately. They're being neurologically rewired to publish every bit of information rather than just stop at consuming. That means when I see a post and I click like, I published. When I comment on it, I published. When I share it with a friend, I published. When I turn my screen around and I say, look at this, I published. What this is doing is it's neurologically rewiring the way that we think so that now we are no longer satisfied by consuming something, but we need to find a way to publish it for it to become real. Okay? Look, think about this. The average teenager looks at their phone on average, conservatively, 4 hours a day, all over the world. That means people in other countries. That means people across borders. That means people that speak other verbal languages are looking at their phone on average 4 hours a day. And they're seeing the same content as they are in South Africa, as they are in Amsterdam, as they are in New York, as they are in South America, as they are in Africa. Everybody is looking at the same content, laughing at the same memes, sharing the same videos, and they're learning how to publish content the same way neurologically. So for the first time in human history, we have the world's first global generation ever. We can truly say that. And that's what Margaret Mead was saying. We have the world's first global generation on our hands. This is a generation we have been praying for, people. For a generation that's not bound by borders or boundaries, that's the most entrepreneurial generation in history, the most diverse generation in history, the most populous generation in history, and the most innovative generation in history by many sources. They are in our seats right now. They are exactly what we prayed for. And we got to ask ourselves, how are we reaching a global generation that are speaking one language neurologically? Think about that. The last time we were one generation that spoke one language was Tower of Babel. That was the last legitimate time this happened. And so today we have an opportunity to change the game and reach publishers exactly where they're at. I remember I was sitting in a conference where we had 25 national youth directors from Asia Pacific. And as I'm talking to those national youth directors about this very thing that I'm talking to you about right now, I mean, we have people from Indonesia, Japan, Philippines, Vietnam, Mongolia was there, Taiwan was there. I mean, South Korea was there. It was insane. And as I'm talking to them about this content, the guy from Vietnam is like scratching his head and talking to his translator while the guy from Japan is bawling his eyes out. And I stopped the conversation and I looked at the leader, the national youth director from Japan or from Vietnam, and I said, talk to me, what's going on here? And he said to me, he said, I see exactly where we're going now. I know it because in about 10 years, we're going to be where you are in America, and I can make changes today. And I look at the guy from Japan and I said, hey, what's going on with you? And as he wipes away the tears from his eyes, he says, Terry, 10 years ago, I went to our national leadership and I asked them for the resources and the training so that we could change our ministries because I saw what you're talking about happening in our country 10 years ago. He said, fast forward 10 years, they told us no, we couldn't have the resources, and our numbers dropped. 10 years ago, we had 30 teenagers on average in every church, and today we have 0.7 teenagers in every church. And he said, and the sad part is they didn't leave because they stopped believing in Jesus. They left and they formed new communities and joined other churches that reached them where they were at. You know, there's a lot of stats out there that are saying that the next generation is leaving the church in droves, but I wonder, are they leaving the church or are they leaving my church? Maybe they're really, truly spiritually hungry in ways that we never imagined before. I'm Generation X, and in my generation, 8 out of 10 people would say no when you invite them to church. Today, because there's not that residue and stigma, 8 out of 10 people actually say, yeah, I'll check it out, I'll try it out. This world is leaning in, especially today, and we have an opportunity to reach them where they're at. And I want to challenge us as leaders of the next generation to ask ourselves, am I creating content that's accessible, that's engaging, and that has community surrounding it? And am I creating a youth service for publishers or just consumers? If you want to create a service for publishers, maybe we look at how long we spend on stage telling them what they should think rather than spending time on stage creating guardrails and then kicking it to the floor so they could have dialogue and frame that up. Are we teaching them how to wrestle with their faith in tangible ways so they walk away with a new identity? Today, we have an opportunity to change the game, to change the course for the next generation, and to activate one of the greatest awakenings, spiritual awakenings in human history by meeting this generation where they're at. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for being a part of this summit. If you have any questions or want to dialogue further, feel free to email me. My email is terryparkman@gmail.com. That's TerryParkman@gmail.com. Or you can hit me up directly on social media at Terry Parkman, just like that on all my social media platforms. Thank you so much, and I look forward to more conversation with you soon.